Good evening. People have asked me to write up a detail about the flight that I had on the 15th of December for my wave flight. So I took the flight track and I imported it into Google Earth, and I'm going to show you a cool presentation. So here we go. So here I am starting off in Front Royal and did an aerotow release at about 4,200 feet above the airport elevation. This was my third flight. I took this flight. First two were very short and I landed very quickly. This one I was going to go much higher so that I could guarantee get into the wave. Once I'm off tow, the cloud bases were pretty low, so I had to move upwind. I decided quickly that hanging out here in front of the Massanutten Mountain was not going to work out, so I headed out over the Shenandoah Valley. Here I'm just beginning my upwind track, and I'm heading across the valley. I didn't really lose much altitude along the way until I got rather close to this mountain here. Here I had to increase my speed to get through a huge area of sink. Unfortunately, by speeding up, I had to lose more altitude. I got to the low point of the flight right over the top of the mountain here, and thankfully the lift got a little bit better once I got past this part. I noodled around here in front of the mountain and underneath some of these clouds, and finally got into an area where there was more up than down. Finally, after noodling back and forth, I make a connection with the wave. You can tell that the wave is where you're at when the flight gets very smooth. The turbulence turns from completely smooth in just a moment, and you can't get a smoother ride even sitting in the hangar. So after I get into the wave, my flight gets much smoother, and I have some time to take some pictures. So here I take a nice photo of the instrument panel, climbing through 10,000 feet. And it's about here that I actually have time to put on my oxygen mask as well. I don't need to put the oxygen mask on until above 12,500 feet, but you might as well put it on early. And I don't like to fly high without any sort of oxygen on board. After I climb up above 12,000 feet or so, I think I'm at the end of this lift right here, and it's my mission to get above 20,000 feet today. So so I have to move south to where we have a special portion of airspace cut out by the FAA that allows us to fly above 18,000 feet. So here I decide that it's time to start going south, and the lift is tapering off, so usually that means I'm a little bit south or downwind of the wave lift. At this point, I have to make a right turn to try to get back into the wave. But it was not to be, so I just continued heading south down to the wave where the wave window is. At this point, there were a bunch of little clouds indicating to me that there was some lift heading upwind, so I did a very slow upwind track along here. There were some points when I really was not making much headway against the headwinds. In fact, the flight computer had recorded a 0 ground speed at this point, and the online contest determined that I had actually landed, even though I was 7,000 feet above the ground below. I decided to pull up my camera and take some pictures, and you can see Sky Bryce over here in the distance. So if you click in on this picture, you can see the ski resort has actually got a little bit of snow on the ground. So moving on, I actually took some nice pictures of the mountains in this direction, and I always love looking at the shape of the wing there. So moving upwind, I finally get to the point that I'm frustrated with the lack of progress and the lack of altitude gain. I didn't really gain much altitude, but it took forever for me to make this slow progress up here. So I make a left turn and decide to continue heading toward the wave window. Once I get in the wave window, things get a little bit better, but I want more. And I knew from the predictions of SkySight that there was going to be better wave lift in the southwestern corner of this wave window. You can see the wave window represented below where it's covered with a yellow border and white grayed out area. So there were a bunch of clouds over in this area. I headed toward those clouds. I'm starting to get rather low. I'm about 9,000 feet at this point. And by the time I get all the way over to these clouds over here, I'm kind of disappointed. I'm in the 7,000 feet range, and there's really not much else going around here. I figured that maybe the wave was not as good today as had been predicted, so I turned around to go home. As I turn around to go home, I have a nice big tailwind along the way. I call this the downwind dash part of my flight. The ground speed was up near 110 miles an hour, and I decided to go home because, I don't know, if I can't get into the wave, then there's not much point in sitting here in the cold. So as I'm heading downwind, I see there's a little cloud in front of me, approximately the same altitude as I am. I turn left to avoid that cloud, and then I realize, hey, there might be actually lift in front of that cloud. So sure enough, I get in front of this little cloud over here, and the variometer is beeping, making noises telling me that there's lift here. So I start doing some zigzags and zigzag up in front. And once these clouds are all moving downwind, so I don't really know if those are wave clouds or if those are just thermal clouds being kicked off. But in any event, I sort of zigzagged in front of them and got higher and higher at a rate of about 500 feet a minute. And after a while, it was definitely wave. So I had to work my way upwind, and the winds got stronger with altitude. The winds were somewhere between 40 and 50 knots coming out of due west at this point. And in this ground track can show you that I really wasn't going upwind very fast. I was climbing very slowly at this point, somewhere between 100 and 200 feet every minute. After a very long time between these 2 points, I finally topped out at 16,171 feet above sea level. The, the, the headwind had been so strong that I can't really get any higher, and the lift was not strong enough for me to get any higher than this. There wasn't much daylight left, so I figured it was time to wrap it up and head home. So I turn right and head on another downwind dash. So while I'm cruising along, I just take a look at the scenery because it's a really beautiful, clear day at this point. And it didn't occur to me to take any pictures at the high point of my flight. And it was not until I was in my cruising mode that it started to take some pictures. So I got some pictures of the instrument panel above 15,000 feet, some pictures of the scenery off the instrument panel, and a couple selfies too. So I did a little bit of a left turn, and I'm back in the lift again. And I wasn't really trying to finally lift, but it's nice to have lift along the way. At this point, it's really time for me to go home. I wasn't really cold, but I really needed to go to the bathroom. 4.5 hours of flying was enough. So I opened the dive brakes and started my descent. A couple minutes later, I did some turns around the area. There was another glider that had landed in front of me. So I was hanging out here just doing circles, waiting for the runway to get cleared. And I just do a normal descent, approach, and landing. It turned out to be a pretty good flying day, 4.5 hours of flying, and a maximum altitude of 16,000 feet. Wasn't as great as I was hoping, but still better than sitting in the house all day. Thanks.